Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, with that being said, let's get the show on the road, Julian.
Okay, so I'll take it away.
Take it away.
So, welcome to the second Man Talk podcast. Today, I'm with Jacob again, and we're going to talk about mentorship. And essentially, throughout this podcast, we're just going to touch on our personal experiences with mentorship and how we, as mentors, help out our mentees in navigating the different stuff that we are knowledgeable in. In my case, I'm going to talk about filmmaking and civil engineering. In Jacob's case, he's going to talk about.
Oh, in this case, for me, it'd be chemical engineering and the mentorship program that it had and what it turned into and where it's going.
Yeah. So we'll talk from our personal experiences and then go over best practices, what worked for us, what didn't work, and how to navigate, and the importance ultimately finding a mentor and accelerating your growth through um, your career or your personal life. So, Jacob, what was your first experience with mentorship? Were you a mentee, or did you just start mentoring, or how did you start mentoring or being a mentee?
So it started officially, you could argue, when I was 12, and there were a couple kids that were getting bullied a lot because they were, I suppose, redneck. And I didn't like that so much, so it was more of an anti-bully attempt to make friends with them. And I was kind of getting bullied a little bit myself, so I identified with their struggle, and we started to just figure out things together. And it was with how to make a fire or little skills in the scouts, and it was meant to be just getting the little stuff taken care of, one skill at a time. It really started taking off in high school with a lot of freshmen when I was a senior. There was a guy, Austin, and we had to hit it off through band. So a lot of band mentorship, getting people equipped and empowered through how to march, how to play high notes, how to play different melodies and chords, how to be cognizant of your posture. And that's really where it started taking off. And then it died again, and but it eventually emerged again in 2012 as the AICHE mentorship program. So, but the origins really were in from like 12 to 17. That's really where it started going on. What about you? When did it start for you?
It's pretty similar. Around 12, I was in sixth grade, I believe, and we were mentoring, I think, kindergartners or first graders, and showing them how, like, oh, this is how to be a big middle schooler. Even though the difference between like a 6 and a 12-year-old is quite significant when you start like talking to them. So that was more of a general like mentorship thing where we're just overseeing the kindergartners or first graders to give them an idea for what to expect in middle school. But the first like true hands-on mentorship for me was in high school when I was in junior year. I was a tutor, and then I was teaching people how to use videography equipment in film class. And then similarly, it died down when I went to college until it picked back up in my junior year again, except with college when I did Aggie TV and Aggie Studios in Davis. And then it transferred over when I started my career in working in the laboratory and then teaching people how to run the different transportation specs at my lab. So it's either came naturally from working on the job or through my own volunteer efforts. So, in your case, Jacob, what have you found that's been very successful in trying to mentor people? And has it changed as you've gotten more experience, or is it more or less tried and true, the same like methodology you've applied since, let's say, you were 12?
At 12, totally different dynamics to 17 in high school, to totally different dynamics at 21 and 20 over at Davis. And at my work now, also different. There are some core things that each one needs, because human beings don't change that much, but the environment does. So to answer your full question, the big deal being give them what they need for the environment. So usually it's the tools. So equip and empower them to get the tools they need to get the job done. So in the case of high school, it was more about band competence. So know how to behave with your fellow band folk, know how to march, know how to play your instrument well, know how to take care of the instrument because it can break. You can dent the trumpet pretty easily if you drop it on concrete from like 5 feet. So you got to be careful of that kind of stuff. And being competent in your music. So we had to memorize a lot of music in marching because you couldn't just carry it around. It's kind of a pain, so you had to have it up here. In jazz, though, it was different. You had to have more, I wouldn't say pizzazz, but you got to be more articulate with the way you speak to your fellow folk about problems, and also in the way you play, like the legatos and the staccatos. And so it depends on the environment, in short.
Yeah. In my case, when I first started in that middle school setting, it was just kind of like, oh, I've never had to do this. So it's like being dropped into the deep end, and it's like, oh, do I try to be their friend? Do I give them actual advice? Are they like cognizant enough to know what I'm offering in terms of help? And in the case of the kindergartner, it's like, no, you just like treat them kind of like a kindergartner and have a good time with them and be like, oh, okay, this is middle school. It's a lot more involved than, playing in kindergarten or first grade playground. But then when it transferred over to a high school setting where you're like tutoring someone is very different, because it's like, okay, well, now we're going to do more hands-on, like what what issues are you exactly struggling with. And for both the people I tutored with, the thing that they struggled with was just actually doing the work. They didn't actually have any conceptual issue with understanding what they were doing. It's just that they didn't have the necessary like time at home or during class to do their homework. So they used tutoring time to like actually do their homework. And once they started like utilizing that time, it's like, okay, well, there's not a lot of mentoring going on that's required for filmmaking. Uh, that's pretty different. I've found that what works the best is to throw people in the deep end and let them actually play with their equipment, right? So I've done both methods where I've talked at people and I lectured them, and then I've thrown them a camera and they said, figure it out. And then in between. So in my experience, the in between, closer towards figure it out, works out better for them by and large, because, oh, well, it's more ingrained in their head that, hey, this is what aperture is, this is what exposure is, this is what shutter speed is, this is how it affects the photo. So if I just verbally tell them, lecture at them, it's not going to internalize and they're not really learning. But if you give a little bit of the theory and then a lot of the practical stuff, they can connect it better. And then very similarly, at the lab, basically hands on. So it's less talking at people and more having them actually work through and struggle, and then literally at my lab, literally get their feet wet and dirty. Because without the actual work on their part, it's not going to sink into their brain what they need to do. So, in your case, Jacob, uh, is it kind of a struggle to encourage people to like get really invested in what they're trying to perform, like in jazz band, or get really invested in networking or any of that sort of thing in a chemical society?
Yeah, so in band, way tougher. You've got all these teenagers that want to do 100 things, and they're very not focused. They're not focused on just one thing. There's like 100 different things they want to do. It's high school, and you need to really rein them in. Uh, but in the case of college, people are investing 4 years into their life saying, I need to do this. This is going to get me to an opportunity I would have not gotten otherwise, and it's going to take a lot of work, and there's a lot of pain along the way. So they're way more willing to listen in that case. So in the case of encouraging young people, I would try and see where they're at. Initial conditions matter. You're an engineer too. You know this. If you don't know where you're starting, you don't know how to finish. So figure out where they're at and really listen. See if they have a lot of things that are blocking their memory, blocking their attention span. See what the initial conditions are. That would be my first thing. The second thing going from there, now that you know where you stand with them, make sure they understand that you're an ally. So one way to do that is to show some small acts of faith in the way you behave. So being professional, having when you say I'm going to be there at 19:30, you show up at 19:30 or maybe a little earlier. You get back to them on messages. You show you're willing to put in the time first, and then they respond with, "This is the standard to how our mentorship is going to work." And then they start opening up a little more because now that they have an establishment of trust with you, now you can really start getting on the hands-on and simulation training. They understand the goal. They know you're not out to get them. And it's more about getting goal-oriented. And a lot of that's through simulations, which you talked about with all the cameras. All the cameras are really good for simulation work. So you want them to fail enough so that way this is how that actually works. I was doing it this way. Oh, that's how that differential equation works. I was trying to solve it a way that was too rudimentary. Maybe I can learn an alternate method instead. So that's a lot of how I am able to encourage young folk. In your case, how was it like with encouraging people in Aggie TV?
So what I found was I really had to calibrate myself to the individual, like you mentioned, see where they're at, but even more so to see if they even want to like do what I would consider busy work, because a lot of work in general I would characterize as kind of busy work, but that doesn't mean it's trivial. That just means that someone has to do it and it has to get done. But from my experience, if you do and master that busy work, then all the interesting work becomes a lot easier and a lot easier to comprehend and actually easier to perform. So in Aggie TV, Aggie Studios, what worked for us when I was either giving workshops or training was to get a feel for where everyone was starting from and then have the workshop geared towards beginner, intermediate, or advanced topics, and that would shift each quarter because we'd have a new influx of students. Um, so I'd have basically a big group, let's say 15, of relatively novice, uh, undergrads who are willing to work in some kind of media capacity, but don't quite understand the technical details of either the reporting side or the visual side or the editing side. So basically on the mentor side, just basically having the program set up and fleshed out to such an extent that I could offer, oh, this is the very basics that you need to run and gun and film what you need to film. And if you want to learn more, stick with Aggie TV, Aggie Studios, and you will learn more. Um, but I wanted to just add on to the whole mentor mentee thing that very importantly, both parties have to participate. It can't be a one-way mentorship process, because if the mentor is just spewing out information without calibrating him or herself to the person, then it's kind of just similar to speaking to a wall. and it's not very productive. Similarly, if the mentee isn't like physically showing up or not interested, then it's important that the mentor like intervene and like, oh, what do you want to get out of the your life essentially? What direction do you want to go? So I found that very often in Aggie TV, Aggie Studios, I would be in a situation where I was communicating ideas, but specific individuals just wouldn't want to listen or didn't care. And I couldn't take that personally. It was just different expectations, and they were probably looking for different things. And you know, I can only do so much to offer to the students who want to learn or to those who don't want to, participate or learn.
It's a two-way
Um,
street. Yeah, that's the best thing.
yeah,
Needs to be two-way.
right. Um, so what was the strongest impact you have on a particular mentee in your experience?
Strongest. You could argue the strongest impact I ever had was over in AICHE. It was 2014, so it's January. So the winter quarter just started. And the mentorship program is really starting to take off. So for this year. So fall quarter is normally when you're getting a lot of people integrated, but they don't really know each other. This time in winter quarter, the word's gotten out. They've had some time to relax over the winter break, and now they're coming back and they want to see a lot of those friends they made and see if it held any weight. And much to their surprise, not only did they find their mentee friends, they found me, they found other mentors, and they were just getting so excited about it. This one guy, Daniel, he was so excited. He was bringing in, hey, can I get this guy in the family? Like, he really wants to be a part of it. Please, the mentorship program, please. And I was just like, wow, I'm not used to this. Yeah, let's meet the guy, but as far as I know, he's in. And they were just like, their eyes are just like that big, and it was so strange. I've never seen that since, that live emotional capacity to just want to get it done and get mentorship program started. I couldn't believe it. And this is just like a little chapter at the college. And he was so motivated by getting people in and hearing what we had to say and what I had to say and my other friend Daniel, what he had to say, that it was just one situation after another. And he turned out to be a super mentor later. So I consider him probably the biggest success story I've got, because he had trouble, he overcame it, he got a lot of people through things, and it was just so cool to watch that progress in his own life. And this is all him. Like, I'm not making him do any of this. This is his own choice. And he ran with it, and he did a great job. And you could argue he impacted probably about 30 people. Easy. Like 30 people he knew for sure. And then they impacted even more. Like, there were layers to his impact. And he just did a great job. And I still am in contact with him today. It's fabulous. What about you? Did you impact anyone in particular, or was it more like a group setting?
For me, it was more like a group setting. I would have one-on-one impacts on specific people, but I pretty much applied the same like general group training workshops or general advice that you would give to a large group. I at least from what I remember, there was no real one-on-one mentor-mentee relationship that I've developed that's stuck across time. That was extremely, how you say, very much my doing, because for the most successful like mentees that I've seen or that I've helped with guidance along the way are the ones who are self-starters and kind of take the burden on their backs and then climb the mountain. And more also on top of that, it's the ones who are willing to climb the mountain but also ask very targeted and very good questions. Um, the quietest people that I mentored, I can't necessarily read their mind. And so I don't know if they're struggling with a concept or if they're perfectly A-okay because they're super quiet and introverted. So I try to tease out of those specific people, hey, so what does this mean? Ask them questions, try to get their intuition developing, whether it be in film or in engineering, just to be like, okay, so if this happens to the exposure, like if you lower the aperture, what's going to happen to the general exposure, right? And then if they were listening during the workshops, they would be like, oh yeah, well, it does this and changes this, blah blah blah. And just for reference for the listeners, the when I'm saying aperture, I'm meaning the f number. So if you lower the f number, the image gets brighter, the number gets smaller, um, and then you get more bokeh in your shot. So it does a bunch of things, and on my end, just asking those clarification questions lets me know that they're, you know, uh, grasping what I'm trying to communicate. And moreover, if they ask follow up questions to topics that I haven't gone to, then yeah, they can, you know, basically intuitively figure it out. Um, so, have you had people, Jacob, where your mentoring ability was just kind of suspect or it didn't work out too easily?
Let's see. So mentorship that's failed.
Yeah.
Usually that's in an individual setting. Like you, the group setting was more prevalent, but I tried to make a nice balance between group setting, where we're doing a fair amount of activity, and then once the action dies down, I go to people one at a time. And I broke it up. So big group to small group to individual. That seems to be a good balance for them. It makes sense. You get a little bit of attention one-on-one and in a group setting. But one that really failed, I mean, I can't blame her for this one, but she, I'll leave her name out because it's kind of a sad story. Um, she essentially jumped into UC Davis as a chemical engineering major freshman, and I met her up in 2012. She wanted to be a mentee, and she just got really overwhelmed consistently, and it was hard. It was hard to get her to be active and get with it, and she just had some personal issues that kept interfering with her life, and eventually she just had a breakdown. And I was, to much to my surprise, I was in the library when she broke down, and she just needed to go home and get herself worked out to what she wanted to do next because she just couldn't take it anymore. She did about a full year's worth at Davis. You could argue, though, she was one of the sweetest mentees I ever had. She left me this card that was just, I took it everywhere. This card, I might post it somewhere because it's just thank you for caring, thank you for giving a crap about me, thank you for getting me a ride home when I just couldn't think straight, and just all these things that I did correctly. And she just realized her own problems and said, no, I need to go to community college, then you start over. And she said, I can't thank you enough. And I carried that card everywhere. I mean everywhere. That card is in a backpack that went with me overseas, that went with me to multiple trips. It's just that she may have failed at Davis, but I don't think she failed in a way that caused her to not get up again. She got up again. And if she's still out there, she knows who she is. I miss having her around. So it absolutely wonderful card. I'll never forget it. I'll keep it forever. What about you? Did anything fail, or?
Yeah. So for me, the failure points came when people would ask me what I would deem the wrong sorts of questions, just to challenge what I'm saying. It's very hard to communicate ideas if you're being challenged on every single point that you're making. It's not a very good point. It's not a very good practice for the mentee to assume that they know more than you or try to play gotcha games. It kind of creates a level of distrust between you and the mentee or the person you're just trying to train, and it's just very much I would use the word toxic environment because it's kind of like, okay, so am I the mentee or what's going on here? Because I thought you were here to learn something, or I was supposed to communicate something to you, but it sounds like you know more than me, or I don't know. It's a strange situation to be in. Uh, with very with I have like specific individuals in mind where um, I would just communicate an idea, and then they wouldn't listen to that, and they would change this topic, and then get lost very easily with the topic that I was actually talking about. Um, I think there's like 3 or 4 people like that in my experience, mostly on the filmmaking side. On the engineering side, it's a lot better. People tend to understand what they're expected to do, but I don't really want to go into great detail with the failures because it's the general trend is basically like, oh, they're combative and difficult to teach or learn anything to. So
Did you do any mitigation techniques to kind of disarm their combative nature? And there's usually a few out there, like you said. But what kind of strategies did you have for taking out these taking out their combative nature?
uh, well, for me, what worked for 95% of people was just trying to be calm and not feed into their combativeness, and just try to answer their questions as best as I can and redirect in the direction that I want to go. But for the 5% of extremely combative people, I don't exactly quite understand what their problem was. Um, and that goes into a whole discussion on oh, do you really need to mentor specific individuals who are so combative and unreasonable that they're just making your life harder? And I would say no, you don't need to do that. You can just focus your energies on those who are eager to learn and very respectful. And if they have a correction comment or some other comment that's necessary to course correct what you're saying, then they can speak it, but not in such a way where they're trying to command the ship for some reason. It's a
Yeah,
very strange mentality to have when you're asking for help, and they're like, "Oh, never mind. I'm gonna help myself now."
yeah. Was this a mutiny, or is this like an actual like trying? Yeah, I know what you mean. It's there. What did you come for? It's like and I'd ask them that for people who were trying to take over. It'd be, what did you really come here for? Because if you wanted to fight, I mean, well, why didn't you say so? Well, let's go. Um,
Yeah, or
and
like a knowledge fight.
yeah, it's like, oh, did you really know about that? Like in the case of AICHE, like if anyone were to do this, it'd be like, oh, okay, well, I guess you didn't want to know about how to navigate through the workforce and how to be able to apply and kind of the ins and outs of an interview that you've never done before, mind you. Uh, and I guess I won't share with you some of those notes, that I was sharing with everybody else. And I'm going to let them know that they're not going to share them with you because you're being a dick. So
Right.
we could start cutting things off here real quick. And I try
Yeah.
and make that very apparent with them. And it was really cool because if you have a high enough population that wants
Yeah.
to really learn, they will ostracize that person and they will
Right.
feel an immediate shame. And they have two options at this point. They can bounce back and say, okay, I need to shut up. Or two, they're going to leave and they're going to get frustrated. They got two options. So that was my way of being able to take the outspoken people and be like, we can stop this right now. I can just go back to my own homework. This whole thing can stop right now. Don't you think that I have to keep going and this is some dream of mine? I'll throw it in the garbage right now. And once they saw it, they're like, wait. I did want it. It's like, oh, why didn't you say so the second time? Okay, let's keep going. So,
Right. Exactly. In your experience as a mentee, if you just gave a little bit of it, I'm assuming you've been in a situation where someone's kind of blown up at a disagreeable mentee, and you're like, "Oh, I don't want to. I want to be with the group, not with this disagreeable guy who's trying to derail this whole thing." In your experience as a mentee, what or which mentor you think's had the most impact on your progression in life, whether in your career or your personal life, and why did that mentor have such an impact?
so all the mentors that I might have had,
Yeah,
I know which one. And of all the ones I've actually been able to spend time with, this guy actually spent time with me. He gave me my first job when I was 20. He gave me a wonderful Bible that I kept with till to this day. Um, it was the Bible that we would look at the comments sector when we did Bible study, and I remember him saying, "You can have this," and I was like, "Wait, what? This is like the one we were looking at for like 3 years," and he's like, "No, I want you to have it." And the same thing with the job. He got me into a uh, assistant mechanics role for a few weeks, and I've never had a job before, and he let me do it, and he let me fail, and he taught me some things here or there, and he gave me a fair amount of autonomy to do it. His name's Bill. Bill, if you're out there, thank you. He was one of the best people that started my life off right in high school, and played Xbox with him, worshiped God with him, read the Bible with him together, and it was only like a couple hours a week here or there, and
yeah,
it was just so cool that a couple years later, he gave me a job for a few weeks, and that was probably the momentum I needed to start getting things on my resume while I was in college. So
yeah.
yeah, that was Bill.
So I guess in my life, I've had like a series of mentors. Aside from like my dad, um, I had my English teacher and history teacher in high school, history slash geography, and then a chemistry teacher in college, and then more distantly, not like one on one, like Jordan Peterson. Um,
Oh,
I, would- I I would count him as a very powerful mentor, even if it's not a direct like one on one. Like the information he's given out has had a pretty profound impact on how I orient myself in life. But specific to the three I mentioned who have had like one-on-one time, the commonality between each of them is that they've offered a perspective of their life and how to orient myself within it, within my life, such that I maximize my potential success given that I put in my um level of effort. So like for the English teacher and the history teacher, they basically said, "Oh, don't worry about going to a 2-year junior college. Go into 4-year directly. That's where you're going to meet your friends for life. That's where you're going to make your connections from the dorms. Um, Once you have your um, initial foot in the door, those first 2 years, you can make connections that way. And by and large, for my English teacher in this case, he is correct. Most of my lifelong friends, I would say, have come out of being in the dorms or participating in Aggie TV, Jacob included, right? Uh, Assuming things work out in perpetuity, right? I would consider you a lifelong friend because I mean we've been friends in some capacity for about roughly 8 to 10 years. Um, so yeah. So yeah, make your friends from the by going to 4 year rather than having kind of a 2 year, then 2 year, and then whatever. Similarly, in Aggie TV, that's how it worked out. I made a lot of like 15, 20 friends just through that. And we still like collaborate together on film stuff, which I'm very much still participating in, and which I still find a lot of meaning in participating in. So I could go on in more detail about all the nitty gritty specifics, but generally speaking, they've provided a general outline of what direction I should try to go in, pitfalls I should avoid, and basic tips of success. And I think recently, incidentally enough, Jordan Pearson has provided a good foundational framework to connect and glue all that information together. Um, never underestimate what you can glean from someone who you never had direct contact with.
Yeah, what does he say? He's like, I'm surprised people are being so taken aback by my YouTube videos. It's like they're learning life advice from a YouTube video. What's wrong with the world? How come they didn't learn it from someone that actually cared about them? He was taken aback by it so much. It's just, oh my goodness, people need help. Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. When they get out there. He's one of my favorites too. And you're obviously one of my lifelong friends too, Julian. Thank you.
Oh, great. Good to hear.
If you didn't know already.
Yeah, I kind of figured, but
it's good to be official.
Yes. So, in terms of, there's this book, to go on a slight tangent. There's this book by an author named Robert Greene. He wrote the 48 Laws of Power, and he also wrote a book called Mastery. And in the book Mastery, there's a chapter that's just dedicated to apprenticeship / mentorship. Basically, an apprenticeship is a type of mentorship, right? And whenever you're trying to obtain mastery in any field, whether it be in like filmmaking, civil engineering, chemical engineering, there's a period of time where you need to learn the ropes. And in that time, it's best to connect yourself with the person who has that knowledge, who's willing to share, and try to, bring up the next generation, so to speak, so that you could obtain the necessary information to do your job or just become a master of your craft. So, Jacob, in your situation, who at your work or in your career path has filled that role as master, giving the information to you to the point where, okay, I'm your apprentice, I'll learn everything I can. And once I've learned that, I can take my necessary steps to become proficient or even a master myself.
So for AMPAC, or where I've worked, I'm kind of sad to say that it really wasn't anyone. And that's kind of sad because I was hoping I would get that.
Right.
So I took forever to get the pieces together to try and come up with something that would be worthy of mastering my craft. And it took about 3 years of really grinding it out and getting bumped to a lot of different process lines. And I finally had something that was worthy enough to get another new folk in. And that one, I'm actually kind of sad that's the way it turned out from an engineering perspective. From UC Davis, it was more of a collaborative effort. Like I can think of several friends that I work with now that are critical to of me getting through the chemical engineering program. Sean, if you're out there, this is for you. Sean, if it weren't for him, I wouldn't have passed a lot of the computer classes, and I wouldn't be able to understand enough to be able to move forward, and move forward being actually passing the class with some level of competency and not just passing the class. And that was cool to have people like him. Steve, if you're out there, that's for you too. He was so important in trying to see what life was like after university. And thanks to him, it was a friendship that we've continued to have for about 7 years, and it's just been great ever since. He's over on the east side of the United States now with his family, but that was important beyond belief once I got through. What about you,
Yeah,
Julian?
I think in my case, I'm in a similar boat where I haven't found like the mentor that I'm looking for civil engineering. But that said, there are plenty of specific individuals I could attach myself at the hip, but I just haven't made that necessary step to take a mentor, uh, have him, take me under his wing and just show me the ropes. I've kind of done it in this indirect, implicit route, which is not very efficient, I would say, and it could be uh, like catapulting yourself over the difficult parts if I were to have found like a better mentor sooner, so that there'd be less like busy work and less difficult work now, so that in the future I'd be like not only in a higher position, but I'd probably also know more information than I currently know. Um, and then in film, it's kind of a unique situation with me because for the most part, I was so invested in understanding every single aspect about the technical side that I could, that I would very quickly become the expert and master that specific domain of either the training or just how to use the cameras properly and operate the the equipment. So similarly, I haven't found a overriding mentor for filmmaking, but usually I found myself to be the mentor to other people, which is interesting. Um, and in terms of my like overall life, I would like to find one of those sages in the wild who just kind of knows so much that you just can't stop listening to them. But I've yet to find that individual. I do believe, like I said, that they would make life a lot easier because they would know all the tricks and shortcuts. Kind of like what you're about to do in the fall. You want to explain what changes you're bringing to your company and how you hope those changes will impact the new recruits and the success of the company?
Yeah, so there's this new initiative to get more people involved in uh, engineering off shift and engineering on days. And the idea is you have a new rib of support for the technical leads. So they have a connection between the manufacturing world and the design aspect of the process. So with that bridge, it's a lot easier to facilitate information and get things going as far as minimizing downtime and getting the right product out the door. Because all it takes is a couple of mistakes in the right place and you ruin your batch. So that's been my initiative, is to get the training aspect really riled up. I've been preparing for it for some time, but I didn't know it was going to turn into an actual position.
Oh,
So now that I know it's an actual position coming my way, um, I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to write down as many notes as I could so I could facilitate this. Now it's not like I have to come up with it from scratch. I have these ideas and I already had some infrastructure of what I wanted because I was really pissed off that I didn't have a training. So I had to make my own, and it took a lot of time. You could argue that I could have learned that stuff in like a year. So
hmm.
that's the new initiative at work. And I'm curious what initiatives are going on with you, Julian.
So at our work, our base, we've been growing. When we started, there was like 10, 15 people in total working in our organization. So it's pretty small. But now we have up to 50 to 75 people, like a significant number of them being undergrad. So basically, we're just streamlining and automating processes such that we can onboard people faster with more efficiency and more of the busy work kind of dialed back in the beginning, so that we could for example, teach them all the testing specs that they need to learn, like how to run a gradation analysis, how to properly dry a sample, all that stuff. We can give them the online training, and then when they actually implement it in the lab, they have minimal questions or they don't need as much hands-on uh, personal connection with the lab staff. Because if you imagine, we don't have a high turnover rate, but students are always graduating or leaving, so you just have a natural influx of new people that come into the lab, learn what they learn, and then just keeping them can be quite difficult when they're about to graduate. So imagine you have an employee at your work, right? And they're there for 6 months and then they graduate. Well, all that knowledge that they obtained in those 6 months just kind of leaves with them, and you start with a brand new fresh recruit. And that's just the nature of working in a university setting. Because if they were like in a plant production type situation, well, that's their full time job, and they're probably going to stick there for a few years. So training them once, you're one and done, and then that's it. Um,
You might think that about plants, at least.
yeah, exactly. So I think in the broader sense for um, what I'm looking for in terms of like a mentor, um, and what I've seen works as a mentee and what doesn't work. Um, I very much appreciate the more hands-on approach where people are more like interactive with you and check in on you. But there's also that inkling reminder that, oh, I have to put in the effort and I have to actually do the legwork. It's not like they can hold your hand forever and make sure you get things done. Do you have a similar experience when you're as a mentee, when you're like underneath a mentor and you're trying to get them to distill the knowledge to them to you as quickly as possible?
Oh, so I'm the mentee in this case?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if I'm the mentee, I need some autonomy and I need some simulations. And I need to be in a safe environment to fail. And those three things are critical. If you cannot fail ever, you never have any simulation. You will find that people get very irrational with the rules. And that happens in industry more than you'd like to, or more than I'd like to admit. But it happens. You need to have safe places to fail, places for learning, and then like an intermediate. Okay, this is a low priority thing. If it gets messed up, it's not that big of a deal, but you've been trained for it, so give it a shot. Okay. And then there's those other ones where you have to go to the meetings for a while and figure out the information from the clients and get what you need before you make the executive order to start. Because if you screw that up, the batch might be ruined, and that could be 2 million gone. And so you need to be absolutely sure that your information checks out. But simulation is what we're right now doing in the fall, getting more people involved with here's some things that have gone wrong in the past, and I'm putting you in the position I was in 2 years ago. Here's the conditions. And I'll behave like the person who informed me of the issue, and I'll try and depending on the situation, I can make it easier or harder depending on what personnel is going to reach out to them. If they're a new guy, I can start saying, well, I'm not familiar with this, and make excuses and make them claw for information. And that's good because you're going to need to claw sometimes. Other times, it's as simple as a more higher up guy says, we need this done. Do you know how to do it? You look at the same data, take care of the task. So that was what I've encountered so far with what's going on at the plant.
Yeah. For your future mentees, do you have any goals outside of your initial training processes that you hope to implement? Or are you going to wait and see how things are calibrated this fall before you think of even grander, like training seminars or simulations?
I'm glad you asked because I did think about it, and there's several things we can do. One of them being this turnover thing. If we could change the way turnover happens, and I mean turnover like people leaving, if we could have it where the person leaving gets the chance to pass his information on to the next new guy, and there's that overlap. They might be a little biased because they're leaving, but the good news is they will be able to talk freely about how the company is and what work needs to get done, how to get stuff done. So if there's that transition of knowledge from person to person, equal status, not like you've got the same boss that's trained like 20 different people and they keep leaving, that might be a good start. So that way it frees up the manager to do other things. And then a second thing being getting more departments able to work on something else. So in this case, having an editing team, not just a bridge between the manufacturing plant and the design team, but also just an internal bridge between engineering. So someone actually is in the interest of reviewing their stuff, and it's not all on their shoulders. And the people who are on their team don't feel like they can just kick it to the side and say it's not our problem. It's like, no, it's your problem. And you're going to have these people who are going to hold you accountable with their edits. So those are the several things I can think of with the future of it. In your case, are you going to end up doing the UC Davis mentorship thing? I know they sent out all those emails to a bunch of alumni.
I don't think I will this fall, but possibly in winter or spring, because I have to get started on studying for my own licensing exam. So I won't have too much time in the evenings to take someone under my wing and then walk them through the process of, oh, this is how you should work through your first few years at UC Davis. But it's definitely captured my eye and interest, but I don't think I have the necessary time to do the commitment. How about you? Are you thinking of doing it, or?
I signed up. I just made my video for it. I'm going to post it here in like the next 24 hours. I'm going to hit up that video for the mentorship program that's supposed to happen tomorrow at 1. And yeah, I'm doing it. I've been waiting for something like this for a long time. So UC Davis is really cranking it up. That's a whole new tier of what they want to do within their department.
Can you elaborate a bit on what exactly they're implementing that's different from the...
Yeah, what they're doing differently this time is a higher tier of accountability. So that's always been a problem with the mentorship program. You get a lazy mentor or a busy one even, someone that's not even malintent. And they can't schedule with their mentees, or won't, depending on the intent. And then no one holds them accountable to make sure they're getting what they need, which is being equipped, getting empowered, figuring out the tricks of the trade, making them better so that way when we have a mentorship program, when that senior leaves, that new sophomore can do something about it and get involved, as opposed to just, well, I never had a mentor, so I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, and then the excuse goes into the next generation and the next one.
Yeah.
So this time they've got this website, and the website is meant to hold someone accountable for if they haven't gotten back to you in like 2 weeks. There's someone that's on the back line of the website that's going to send them a message and say, hey, you need to be able to message your fellow mentees, or mentees, you need to respond to the alumni that are telling you things. And I thought that was radically different than before. Because before, people were just so busy, they'd say, oh, I don't have time to hold my team accountable. And now they're having outside people taking the initiative there. The second thing being, you can use that website as an interface to start with. And it gives you, like, let's say you were a novice mentor, it kind of gives you an idea of how to flow with them. So if you've never done it before, they actually have introductions to how to be a mentor. That's pretty interesting as well. And they've got some other interlocks that I haven't discovered yet. I'm really curious if it's going to work because this is a whole. I haven't seen anything like it before. So yeah, that's what I've seen them do. Um, yeah, for anyone that's going to get involved with it, I'm curious to see how it goes.
Yeah, hopefully it's a fulfilling process when you do work through it. And do you get to have one mentee or several?
So no joke, they said you can have up to 10, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's too much.
Really?
That's too much,
Huh.
um, especially for something this new. So they put up in the, I think they put it up in their description, like you can, it's like 3 to 6 hours a month for 5. And I was like,
Oh
look,
no.
I was like, well, I'll do 5, fine. I'll buy into what they say. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. That would be very interesting to see how that works out actually.
Yeah, I'll keep you informed. I'm looking forward to it. And as you said before, it's a two-way street, so
Yeah.
it could easily fall downhill. We've had industry mentorship programs that didn't even make it through the year. Like they didn't make it through the year, and that was within
Wow.
AICHE. Alumni to upperclassmen. That's what it was. So I'm curious if their accountability is as big as the site says it is, and I'm willing to give it a
Well,
shot because I think that's an awesome thing. What you were gonna say
well,
something?
yeah. It's probably the accountability aspect's been placed in because of past feedback, and this is could be the first iteration of oh, okay, well, this is how we're going to keep both sides accountable. Let's see how this works. So they might calibrate it again for the winter and the spring if they continue the program.
If that's the thing, a lot of these mentorship programs come and go. Um, yeah, the last one I was a part of, it just died within like I think it was 2 quarters because by the time the third one was there, they had people, but no one was meeting up.
Oh no,
And it's like, did people want to do this? I understand if people get busy, but I also understand if you sign up for something and you want to do it.
you should show up. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's just if you want to actually get involved and learn something, that sets a bad record for both mentors and mentees for not saying what you were going to do.
right. Yeah, it becomes challenging when you're trying to get someone interested in something when they don't even know if they're fully 100% committed to it because it's that goes back to like, oh, am I speaking to someone who's really going down this track, or is it kind of wavering and like, oh, I don't know, I kind of want to do this in life, and I don't think I can commit X hours to blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, well, then that might need to go down a few levels, and like, okay, what am I doing? Why am I in college? Why am I at this job? And if you can answer that pretty cleanly, then maybe step up a bit and just take down this existential angst or crisis that might be bubbling under the surface so that you can figure out, oh, okay, well, I'm here because of, and then you have your reason. And it's like perfect. So yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add about mentorship or your own personal experience in mentorship, Jacob?
Man, this could be a whole other session, but at least for today, I think we hit a pretty good flow. So I'm willing to about conclude and wrap this up here. Maybe for another time we could do more on more targeted things that happened in our past or some other experiences that we've heard from, because we didn't get involved with a lot of like what AICHE did in the past, and I can go into that some more. Um, so at least for today's session, I think we hit it pretty good.
Like, yeah, sounds good. Yeah, the only other thing I would add for finding a mentor or trying to find a master in your craft to like learn under is that it's very important that you're going to commit yourself 100 or 110% to the process that's involved, even if you think it's, oh, this is busy work, I don't need to listen to it. Uh, that's a very incorrect mindset to have. At least from my perspective, any information is good information, and then you can filter that information at a later date. You can hold your prejudices on the back burner, so that you can like figure out, oh, okay, that was valuable, that was invaluable. There's no reason to be like, oh, I'm going to show up and then never show up again. Um, any information that you can glean from, or can get communicated to you, is good information in my book.
Yeah, it's not necessarily who it's coming from, but it does matter sometimes. I mean, Jordan Peterson, for example, that guy. It's because he's saying it that makes it even. It's got more emphasis, and the guy also is just an amazing public speaker. So he's got a lot of things going for him. That just it's not just the information, but how it's presented and the implications behind it and the motivations you're going to have after. So there's like all this extra firepower that comes with it. So it's not gleaning. It's like straight up like, here is the wheat. So
here is the information you should know. This is it.
So yeah, no, that I think we did not too bad on that one. But for next time, I would probably go into some other topics that we don't have time for now. So it'd just be a good place to cut it. Cool.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for tuning into the second podcast.
All right. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.